All right, folks, this is Danny with Poem a Day, edition number 3. And what we have today is a timely piece. We are going to listen to me read Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats from the early 19th century. It's very timely for a number of reasons. I thought about it today because I was listening to BBC Radio 3 Late Junction, and they played a remarkable piece of music. And it was by a composer from Brighton, England, who wrote a piece to evoke and to speak to the declining population of the beautiful songbird Nightingale throughout England and the world. And she did an amazing thing. She translated John Keats' famous poem, Ode to a Nightingale, into Morse code, and beep, 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 beep. That was part of her sonic palette in the composition, as well as birdsong itself and so many other textures. And that was quite poignant. So I thought about the text itself, and it's pretty thorny stuff, but we can get into it. So a couple of notes before I read it. We live in a STEM type, tech type dominated age in terms of power and in terms of influence in the academy and in many places. And that they preach that goes back to the Renaissance in Europe, when Europeans rediscovered, after the Christian repression in the Dark Ages, they rediscovered pagan Greek texts, ideas that had come from Arabia and Egypt and ancient Greece, and they were rediscovered, and this permitted the flourishing of science, etc. Well, there's another important piece to that puzzle, which is, of course, in the late 1700s and early 1800s, these same cultures, ancient Greek culture in particular, reemerged in Europe and inspired the arts, poetry in particular. You can imagine 1,500 years of the church limiting the scope of what was permissible in terms of dreaming and longing and creating. And the ancient Greek culture and its myths and stories and poetry were kind of a nice antidote to that. So that's the context in which John Keats is writing. And another thing important to remember, and that comes up in this poem, is that a lot of ancient Greek ritual and theater involved hallucinogenic drug use. That's becoming more and more recognized, that sacred visionary trips were part of the mysteries, for example, as one stream within Greek culture and Greek religion. So you will hear Keats referencing hallucinogenic experiences and substances. Let's also talk about some of the specifically Greek vocabulary that appears in the poem. First one might be Lethe. Lethe is a river in Hades from Greek mythology that if you drink it, it spurs forgetfulness, forgetting, and the vanishing of memory. He uses the word dryad, capital D, that is a tree nymph. He uses the word hippocrene. Hippocrene is the spring on Mount Helicon, according to story and mythology. that was kind of the fount of the muses, where these muses that inspire poetry and visions, where they would hang out. Originally founded when the winged horse Pegasus landed and kind of got his hoof stuck in the ground, provoking the spring. So, with that, I'll have some of my own River of Lethe. Now, I don't think I want to go into forgetting. I'll have some of my own water from the Hippocrene, the sacred spring. And I'll be ready to get into this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stanzas. 2, 4, 6, 8, about 12 lines per stanza. This is not a short poem. This is not a short poem, not too long, but it goes on a journey. He speaks in the second person to the nightingale throughout the poem. That's a beautiful device, I think. What else? He's speaking of the difference between him and the nightingale. You'll hear a lot of that. Also, he ends up going on like a visionary trip journey with the nightingale. That is quite spectacular. Alrighty, another sip from Hippocrene, and we'll be ready to roll. Ode to a Nightingale, John Keats. Remember, he's speaking directly to the bird. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou, light-winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled a long age in the deep-delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and Provençal song and sunburnt mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of warm south, full of the true, the blushful Hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple-stained mouth, that I might drink and leave the world unseen, and fade with thee into the forest dim. Fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what thou among the leaves hast never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret here, where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last gray hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow and leaden-eyed despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. Away, away, for I will fly to thee, not charioted by Bacchus and his pards, but on the viewless wings of poesy, though the dull brain perplexes and retards. Away with thee, tender is the night, and haply the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by her starry phase, but here there is no light, save what from heaven is with breezes blown through verdurous glooms and winding mossy ways. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs, but in embalmed darkness guess each sweet wherewith the seasonable month endows the grass, the thicket, and the fruit tree wild, white hawthorn and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, the coming musk rose, full of dewy wine, the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eves. Darkling I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death, called him by soft names in many a mused rhyme, to take into the air my quiet breath. Now more than ever it seems rich to die, to cease upon the midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. Still wouldest thou sing, and I have ears in vain, to the high requiem become a sod. Thou was not born for death, immortal bird. No hungry generations tread thee down. The voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown. Perhaps the self-same song that found a path through the sad heart of Ruth, when sick for home she stood in tears amid the alien corn. The same that oft-times hath charmed magic casements, opening on the foam of perilous seas in fairylands forlorn, forlorn. The very word is like a bell to toll me back from thee to my soul self. Adieu. The fancy cannot cheat so well, and she is as she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Adieu, adieu, thy plaintive anthem fades past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now 'tis buried deep in the next valley glades. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music. Do I wake or sleep?